At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Gabrielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's great to be here, and hello to your listeners.
Oh yes, and where are you at this point in time? Where are you living?
I am in Sydney, Australia, the best city in the world. We've just come out. We are just shameless plug for Sydney. We've just come out of 2.5 weeks of torrential rain, and the sun has been shining since yesterday. So it's really, really great. And
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, that rain can be really tough in Asia in that area. And I know that. So
Yes.
for those that are watching this versus listening to it, you've got a bunch of elephants behind you.
I do. And that's because I'm not actually in Africa, although I was born in Africa and grew up in Africa. So that saying there, that quote, the African proverb, is something that really touches my heart. Having, once you've been in Africa, it stays in your blood.
Yes, and a good leader was once a good follower. Yeah, I like that
Absolutely.
saying. So what I'd love for you to do is share with the audience how you got to the point you are, because you've gone through a lot of different things. And it's fascinating to me as we go through our lives and we have our professions and so forth. And there's a story behind why all of a sudden, or not maybe even of a sudden, maybe that's just a transition, we reach a point in our lives where we're doing what we're doing presently. I'd love for you to share with the audience your story.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Well, you said I've done a lot of different things. It's actually, I had a really steady career for about 25 years. What happened was, as a young child, I was always interested in two things. I was interested in psychology and I was interested in spirituality. And, my father passed away when I was 9. It got a lot of questions. I was asking a lot of existential questions. At one point, I said to my mum, I'd like to go and see a medium. She said, absolutely no way. And so what happened after that was I just followed the psychology route. And when it came to going to university, no brainer, I studied psychology. And I had a really great career for a long time, for over 2 decades. I worked in organizational psychology, big corporates, and I thrived. It was a huge part of my identity. And what happened was in about, 2018, 2019, things started to shift. The career that once really lit me up started to fade. And I felt a sense of disconnect with not so much what I was doing, but the environment, the corporate environment started to really trip me up. And I started to see the dark underbelly of corporate life. It was interesting because I'd been aware of it and privy to it, but I'd never really felt affected by it. And so there were questions floating around in my mind. What do I do? What's happening here? And then in 2020, I had that inflection point where I was in a senior leadership role in a bank of all places. And I was depressed. I was highly anxious. And I woke up one Sunday morning and I had this terrible pit in my stomach. And that pit took me on a walk, a bushwalk, listened to a podcast, funnily enough. And that was my awakening. I realized I no longer wanted to change, I actually had to change. And so that was the inflection point. And a short while later, I had an advert in my Instagram feed, and I attended a 3-day extended weekend workshop on energy, and the rest is history. So it was, in many ways, there was an inflection point, but it had been building for quite some time. But, I needed a catalyst, which was hitting rock bottom for me to make this change. And so I've kind of come full circle. I'm now keeping my psych practice. I, bring that very strongly into my work, but I throw in the world of energy, which gives a nice spiritual tone to it.
And are you doing more on a personal level now, or are you
Very
still doing
much.
corporate level? Okay, so you moved into the personal level.
I really have. And I've never really done that. I've done individual coaching in a corporate setting. They've been corporate clients, and then their leaders have come to me for coaching. But I've never actually worked with individuals, like ordinary citizens. And that's what I'm doing now. I still do some facilitation in the corporate world because I love facilitating, but I'm not in it. And yeah, I'm working with human beings, people like you and I, who are stuck as I was and who are wanting to pivot and make some really big changes that they just don't know how to.
Well, and as you combine psychology and your reference to spirituality, define for the audience what you mean, what your perception is of spirituality.
Well, for me, it's about consciousness. My spiritual journey has been about expanding my consciousness. And not from a psychological perspective, that's just getting to know yourself better. But spiritually, what that means is being able to really tap into the fact that we are actually not separated. Humanity is totally interconnected. And I'm able to tap into different sources of wisdom now than I was before. So, for example, my intuition is deeply, deeply honed. Having studied energy for 18 months, I've been through the process. My internal GPS is on. So I've activated my spiritual gift of intuition. And so what that's done is it has allowed me to really tap into higher source knowledge when I'm at my own inflection points, when I'm working with my clients, not quite sure where to go next. There's a different wellspring that I can draw from to move myself or the other person in a different direction. So expanded consciousness, that is how I would
And
define it. Yeah.
does that become a, you're working with a client, something comes up and, you're sitting there going, okay, where do we need to go with there? Is it a conscious tapping into a deeper level, or is it just naturally come?
Well, it's interesting. It's such a great question you've asked, because in the beginning, I used to go oh, I feel stuck. I can't read this person's energy. What does this mean? But now it's much more unconscious because, as we develop skills, we become unconsciously competent. So we're just drawing on things we now know they're part of us. And that's the same with my intuition. It's like, what's actually happened when I'm working with someone is I feel almost like I've stepped back from the process, and my higher self, that wisdom that I have that's not in my conscious, being, that part of me has taken over and is doing the work for me. It's difficult to explain, but it's a little bit of an altered state in that it's unconscious.
Okay, and you talk about your higher self. I know there are many people that talk about quantum physics and getting into the quantum field and so forth. And I don't know, do you go in that direction at all? Do you talk about the quantum field?
I actually do. I do. I tap into other sources of wisdom. If you're open to talking about that, then I'm happy to talk about it. I usually just get my cue from the podcast host as to how far I can take this. But yeah, I do. I tap
Yeah,
into various things. I tap into, can I go there?
yeah, you know what? Yes, because I think for people, people talk about their higher self, and I think for some people that's very difficult to understand. For those that can envision, the quantum field, there's some scientific basis behind that. And I think that people need to understand that there are ways in which they can tap into, quote, their higher self and really gain that inspiration, that wisdom. For some, it may be from a religious perspective of, whether they're Christians or they're Buddhists or whatever that happens to be. But I'd love for you to, yes, get into it. That's what this is all about.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay. So really, the way that I define my higher self is by thinking that we've got different versions of ourselves that exist in any point in time. We've got our present self, which we're aware of. I'm sitting here with you. podcast conversation. I think, we've also got our past selves. We draw on that when our memories come to the fore. When we're doing personal work in therapy, we're going back to our past self and we're taking experiences and lessons. So that version of ourselves exists, and there are multiple versions of that. There's the version of us that, is a toddler, version of us at school. They're multi dimensions. And then there's also a future self, but we can go into that at a later point if you want. But this version of ourself that exists, that has transcended the 3D reality. It exists in a realm where it's sorted out the problems. It knows intuitively how to solve the problems that we're facing in our current reality. It's the part of us that's got the answers. Now, that's the mystical way of saying it. But if I just said to you, can you tap into yourself? There is a part of you deep down that knows how to work through the problem you're facing. That's what I'm talking about. And the way that I help people access it, which is not a little bit more mainstream, is working through dreams, because your dreams contain your unconscious, and actually it's more than that. When we dream, we travel, and we can access the frequency of these different versions of ourselves to heal ourselves in our sleep. So that's the way that I teach people how to access that intuitive voice of wisdom, which is by really building a relationship with your dream state and working through stuff in your dreams.
Okay, I don't dream very often. So what's the challenge?
Well, firstly, I would challenge you, Doug, and I'd say you probably do. You do dream probably very often. The challenge is probably recall. You're probably
Yes.
not remembering your dreams, and that's common.
Well, and I woke up the other morning and I just had such a crazy dream, and I know what it was exactly about and why it was triggered, but it was like, okay, and then I thought to myself, all right, is there any meaning to this dream other than the fact that whatever, and I wear a CPAP, okay, and
Right.
I was dreaming that I just needed to get it off, and I woke up and I did, but I thought to myself, all right, what's the deeper meaning that I need to get the CPAP off my face?
Well, we could go there. We could spend the rest of the podcast talking about that if you want. But he's crazy. It's so, if I said if we all dream, okay, and what you've just described is that crazy experience we go to in another altered state, in a
Yes.
realm. And that's often a doorway into spirituality for me, because if you didn't dream and I told you what happened in my dreams, you'd think I was mad, right? But actually,
Right.
I activated my mother's ability to remember her dreams inadvertently. She never remembered a single dream. Now, every day she's telling me, and they are crazy. My dreams are crazy. They're all crazy. This is the beauty of being able to access different parts of ourselves and
Okay,
set the
so
dream state. Yeah,
I'm going to have two questions. So I apologize. I always ask at
go
least
for it.
more than one question, which is
Love
really
that.
tough for
Love
people.
it. No, love it.
But so first question is, how many times when someone is watching, a TV show at night before they go to sleep, I know that can affect. I remember specifically sometimes I'm watching a show and then I dream something
Yes.
about that show. So,
Yes.
Yes. I don't know that has anything to do with anything other than that was in my conscious or subconscious. But secondarily, in the second question I have is, and you mentioned it, how do you unlock your ability to remember your dreams?
Okay, so let me just write those down, because these days I don't remember. If you ask me more than one question at a time, I've got to write it down.
Okay. And if I don't ask the two questions at once, then I forget one of them.
Welcome to the club. Yes. So let's go to the first one. I think, very often, something we've spoken about in the day a chapter in a book we've read, a movie, the news, whatever it is you were doing just before you go to sleep, they find their way into our dreams. But not everything does, just certain things do. So
Yeah.
they're still relevant because somewhere in some level, our subconscious has said this is an important construct to bring into the dream for some reason or other.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. That
Yeah.
answers that one. So now how do I start remembering my dreams?
Well, I mean, what I do, I don't just do healing, I also do activation because we've all got we've got innate gifts, talents. That, one of them is our ability to dream and work with our dreams. One of them is, intuition, and I can actually activate those, but you don't have to come to me to do it. You can actually get into a routine yourself. And it's quite simple. So what I teach people is the important thing over here is consistency, and do it for a period of like 21 days and see what comes up. What you're going to do is just before you go to sleep, you're getting ready to go to sleep, you get into a meditative state of some sort. You don't have to be meditating, but just make sure you're in a quiet, clear space where you are open and receptive and you're in an authentic place. Sometimes for me, that happens after I take a hot bath at night or whatever the case may be. What you're going to do is you're going to have a conversation with your dream while you're awake, and you're going to set an intention. And you might say, perhaps you just set a general intention, dream, tonight as I go to sleep, please help me remember what is going to help, what is in the highest good for me to remember. So you're basically, what you're doing is you're commanding your dream to help you remember what is, what you dreamt. You could ask something more specific. You've got an issue in your life that you want to sort out and you want your dreams to help you with it. You could ask your dream a specific question. For example, dream, tonight as I sleep, please help me understand why I'm not getting on with my co-workers. For example, that's just an example. So the point is you're taking time in a quiet space, you're setting a heartfelt intention, and you're in a conversation with your dream. Then you can either just go to sleep after that, or if you want to amplify the energy, you can do a little ritual before you go to sleep. So for example, if you are asking the dream about why you're fighting with your co-workers, you can perhaps take your work notebook and sleep with it next to you or under your pillow, because it's bringing in the energy of work into your dream state. Just kind of adds a little bit of fuel. Then when you go to sleep, and when the minute you wake up, you have to take notes of whatever you remember. Doesn't matter how small or seemingly insignificant, and get very, very granular. If you say you don't remember, all you do is when you wake up, you write down how you're feeling, because that's the leftover from your dream. And if you do that for 3 weeks in a row, Doug, I can guarantee you'll start remembering dreams.
Oh, fascinating. And so that brings up the next question.
Yes.
So in our dreams, is it really, in many cases, our subconscious, that area that we're not even conscious about, the subconscious that is literally affecting our lives, because we know that really is our life experience based on our limiting beliefs, our beliefs, whatever that happens to be. Do the dreams really bring up the subconscious so that we're able to look at those and analyze those and potentially start to find some solutions?
Very much. That's the whole idea of working intentionally with your dreams, is that you can bring to the surface what was out of your awareness in your daily life, because those things are sometimes too confronting for us, to just go there. So your dream offers you a vehicle to surface that and to work with really deeply, deeply held things that we haven't. Sometimes we know what they are, and sometimes it's the first time we've ever thought about it. So dreams can have dual purposes. They can bring the deeply unconscious to the surface, or you can dream about things you kind of know about, but you haven't really learned the lesson. So it gives you an opportunity to take your understanding a bit further.
Well, and what I do know is people are seeking to overcome those challenges in their lives, and obviously they have to get to the point where they become aware and mindful enough to realize that what I'm experiencing in my life is not what I want to experience, and ultimately, as you know, when we finally take the responsibility to say, you know
Yes.
what,
Yes.
I can't be a victim and blame everybody else for what's going on in my life. I really have to take the responsibility to recognize that I'm creating my own life, even if it's subconscious stuff. So that's the first step. But then there are so many challenges that people experience when they start to really want to focus on that healing and that growth. What are some of the common challenges that you see your clients face, and how do you help them to overcome?
Yeah, okay, that's so great. I mean, you're absolutely right. In order for somebody to embark on a journey of change and healing, they've got to have to own it. And that's actually a big barrier to get to. I know there's a problem to, I actually own that I'm the common denominator in my life. It's like moving from the head to the heart. So let's assume that they are there, that they know that they actually have internalized that they have to change. The one of the biggest most common barriers in change is getting off the starting blocks. A lot of people understand their stuff, they understand what's holding them back, but actually making the changes in real life is the tricky part. It's a little bit like knowing a recipe, but struggling to cook the meal. It's the gap between what we know about ourselves and turning it into action. And you're right, you just said, we get to a point where we realize that this is really, those moments of discomfort where we have enough motivation to want to change. But most of us need that wake up call. Now, at an energetic level, you have to, very often, you have to be at a point in your life where the status quo feels unbearable. It's no longer tenable. You've got tired of the patterns in your life, but really, really tired. There's actually almost a survival element to it. If I don't change, I really won't be able to continue. I really won't be able to function effectively anymore. And so that's the big thing is getting off the starting blocks. And the question then, because underpinning that is fear. So how do you deal with fear? And the best way to deal with fear is through the antidote, which is love. So bringing love into the moment. And how do you do that in practical terms? You really increase acts of self-care. You do stuff for yourself that neutralizes the fear through self-care, self-love, self-respect, and sitting with your fears. The other part of it, I've learned through my own experience that the human body can't actually sit with intense emotions for too long. For me, it was about 17 minutes. I think the limit is about 18 minutes. And really going into your fear and what would happen if I started changing my life? What's the fear about? That's a really important part of it. And also working with your dreams. Maybe this is a point to ask your dream state and say, dream, can you explain to me why I'm so scared of change? So getting off the starting blocks is a big one. There are others, but that's a really big one.
Well, and it's interesting about fear because so often people don't realize, I think, that the fear of the unknown, I think this is where the resistance to change becomes so strong because it's easier to be comfortable with the known, even though you may not enjoy it, versus the unknown. And so, as you say, and I appreciate what you say there, fear can be such a challenge in our lives. And how have you find as you're working with your clients, how do you help them really overcome that fear of the unknown so that they're really willing to move forward? Now, you talked a little bit about the dreams, but could you get a little bit more definitive?
Yes. Well, there are different ways you can do it. You can either increase their sense of discomfort with the status quo so that they're like now prepared to get off. That's not typically my way of doing it. Or you can really bring psychological safety into the process for them. and help them experience change and healing in a way that is actually fulfilling, not scary. And it's quite easy to do because, most of us are motivated to evolve. We all want to grow most of us want to grow into the best version of ourselves. So all the way in the process, as people are taking small steps forward, I am supporting them. I'm helping them acknowledge and really celebrate the progress they're making. And I love learning so much. So it's really easy for me to help people see that this is actually a really fulfilling process. Once you get over the hump, what's on the other side, I help people see beyond the finish line, because that's where you want your energy to go. You don't want to, focus, oh my God, this is so difficult. But you actually really keep people focused on the bigger picture is a really important part of what I do.
Well, and as I think about dreams, and so often, and we kind of smile and laugh about this, but when people think about dreams, they're going, "Oh, come on, give me a break. You're helping people through their dreams." But let's look from a more scientific standpoint. What is happening to the brain when we sleep? Is it a form of hypnosis? Because we know that hypnotherapy, can literally allow us to bring forth those emotions and remember things that we don't normally remember. What is it about sleeping that allows the subconscious to bring, or whatever, to bring up those elements that we need to be able to be aware of and to deal with? Could you share with the audience what you feel about that?
Well, I don't really know about the physiological side of sleeping, but I know that there are different brain waves. This is not the same as a meditative or hypnotic brainwave. That is a theta state. That is a very different experience. And I can bring people into theta state as well. That's the other thing. But I'm not sure I can answer it only really from a psychological perspective, which is that your mind, your active brain shuts down, your defenses go down, and you enter a brainwave state that allows you to just, all the unconscious stuff to come up. I don't know the physiology behind it, Doug, to be honest. I wouldn't be able to answer that. But what I can say is it is a different state to hypnosis, which is a theta state. And the theta, I think Americans call it theta, is that state where if you might have experienced it, where you're awake, semi-conscious, it's like you're standing back and you are observing what's happening, but you're kind of witness. It's like you're in the background of what's happening, but you're aware of it. It's a very powerful state to be in. And when I'm in theta state, that's when I set intentions. That's when information gets downloaded to me from our higher self that I ordinarily wouldn't think of. I write prolifically in that state because I'll forget about it afterwards. So yeah, that's a different state.
Well, and I think sometimes people do reach that in sleep. From what I've seen and studied, not often. They're in that alpha state and so forth, but occasionally they can get there. So, but as you talk about the theta state, and that's where you're able to really set intentions and so forth, what comes to my mind as a question is, how do you get yourself into that theta state? Is it through meditation? How do you do that?
Well, you have to build the capacity. So that's why, like working with energy, and it took I think I was in end of level 2 training when it started to happen, because how you do it is by expanding your energetic capacity, activating your energy through multiple energy activations. You're able to do that. And initially it was, oh gosh, like suddenly it would come on me when someone was doing a healing on me, or just before I was going to sleep, or while I was lying on my bed, it would like suddenly come on me, and then I would capitalize on it. Now I can do it through intention. So I can set the intention. It's almost like to go into that state, I can just sit quietly and then I sink into it. But it took 18 months of really intensive energy healing and energy activation to get there. So that's something that you probably, for the uninitiated, would need a little bit of support getting into.
Well, when you talk about energy activation, energy mastery, explain to the audience what you mean by that, because I think of energy and I'm thinking, okay, I'm running and I got energy and so on and so forth. We're talking about an entirely different element here. Can you explain to the audience what you mean by
Yes.
energy, and
Yes.
what is it to master that type of energy within our lives?
Yes, now that, and it is different. I mean, you're absolutely right in the sense that it's not feeling energized. It's something quite different. And actually what I'm helping people work with is, I mean, energy is the life force, it's the breath of life. That's what it is, and it runs through us. It regulates everything in life, including the strength and the quality of our thoughts and our emotions, because actually a thought isn't anything but an energetic frequency, right? Same with an
Right.
emotion, right? So if you can think about it as the power behind everything you do, the invisible fuel that drives how influences how you feel, how you think, how you navigate life. That's what it is. Now, yes, it can be low vibrational. You can have blocks which make you feel lack of energy, drained, but also the thing that I'm more interested in is when we develop energy blocks, they become like invisible handbrakes. They put the brakes on, and we find ourselves in these repetitive patterns of thinking and behaving and being and experiences that just can't get out of this. It's like a cycle, and we may have tried other forms of therapy. We may have tried, nothing we can do can shift it. And that's because the energy hasn't been released. The experiences that we hold, the memories, all the things that are fueling the stories we tell ourselves and the identity, these things have an energetic frequency. That's what I'm working on. The blocks, the things that hold us back, and working at the energetic inception point of that to release the blocks. So it is very different.
Well, and as you say that, I think about why is it that people continually experience the same thing over and over again in their lives, and they can't figure it out. And when you talk about energy, and particularly the subconscious, that we're like magnets, obviously,
Yeah.
and so whatever that energy is that sometimes we're not even aware of attracts and brings to us the similar frequency, as you say, of the similar energy, which means it can be negative or it can be positive. So how does one start to release that type of energy? I know, people talk about chakras, they talk about all these
Yeah.
different things, they talk about the frequencies in the quantum field. How does one go about, based on your experience, starting to release those negative energies and create the positive energies that start to attract the positive things in our lives, where we start to really experience that sense of love, joy, happiness, whatever that is?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess that's the question. We're going back to the question about what energy mastery is. And I just remembered as you were asking me this question that I'd forgotten to answer the second
Okay.
part of your question before. So what it is there's my blueprint has got 5 elements to it. The capacity to understand your energy, so having a higher level understanding, consciousness regarding not just your energy levels, but your blocks, your patterns, and what triggers you, what triggers your mood to change, what triggers your energy to dip, what gets you in and out of state. So understanding is the first part of it. Second part of it is protecting your energy. So before you even work on yourself, you've got to start by eliminating blocks in your environment. Okay, not within you, but within your environment. People that bring you down, jobs, like in my case, jobs that have broken you. There are things we can do to eliminate blocks in our environment. Third part of energy mastery is the clearing, and this is where the real work starts, and it links to the question you've just asked now, because we've all got invisible energy blocks. They accumulate over time, and what we do, you're absolutely right, we work with the chakras. I teach people how to scan their chakras and how to feel initially, how to intuitively feel which chakra might have an energy block. So that's a skill. Then once you've found it, say it's in my throat chakra, how do you release it and how do you replenish? Because once you've released a block, you can't leave a void. The universe doesn't like voids. You've got to actually fill it up with love and light, and you've got to close that, you've got to replenish it. So there's a methodology that you teach people to do that, but there are simple things you can do to help clear your energy. That's the third one. How do you maintain your energy? So how do you interrupt dips, and how do you optimize? That's the activation piece. How do you expand your capacity? But in the clearing space, the best way to do it is to learn how to do it. And I can't do that now, but
Well, that was going to be my next question.
I can't, and I tell you why, because it's a graduated process, and I've got a series of lessons. It's not simple. And the principles you've got to learn before you do it,
Right.
But if you don't know how to do the clearing, you can do things in your own way, like to clear blocks. I mean, one way, as you've spoken about, is working with your dreams, because repetitive patterns are likely to come up in your dream state, but also, getting out into nature. I love the energy of fire, and so I love being in the sun. And if I've got back-to-back meetings, Doug, or if I'm feeling particularly flat, I've had a really awful meeting and I'm feeling flat. Most of my stuff is online these days. I'll step away for 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, go into my garden, stand in the sun, and what the fire energy does is it transmutes. It clears and it transmutes. So if you're feeling low, you're going to walk away feeling a bit elevated and lifted, gives you a pick-me-up. So those are things. For other people, it's water. Having a swim in the sea, salt water can be very cleansing. Otherwise, standing under a shower, people love that. That can be a very cleansing way of, just cleansing out your energy. It's not going to go to the deeply held stuff, but it's going to cleanse out your energy level to some degree. So there are simple things we can do using elementals in nature as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, and one of the things you talk about, and we haven't really labeled it, you've mentioned it a couple of times, is this sense of mindfulness, a sense of consciousness, and realizing that this is a level of awareness that most people don't really experience, particularly when they have all of these subconscious things going on in their lives that's creating their experience. And as you talk about that, what is the effect of that mindfulness, of that consciousness, to be aware, as you say, if you get triggered, rather than responding in that emotional way, going, wow, I just got triggered. What is it subconsciously that is causing me to get triggered? And all of a sudden, now you have become mindful, you have become conscious of that element rather than being affected by it.
Yes, that's right. I think consciousness and awareness is the start of any journey of learning, change, healing. Doesn't matter what modality you're using, and if you're sitting in talk therapy, you're going to spend a lot of time unpacking your past and really bringing to the surface what some of your behavioral drivers are. In energy work, I do a similar thing, but we're really teaching people how to get in touch with their internal state. And it's actually easier than you think. So I'll give you a simple tool, very simple tool, which is paying attention to your language, the words that you use, because the words that we use, affect how we think about our lives, how we experience things, and how we show up, behaviors. And they're connected to thoughts. That's actually a bi-directional process, because our thinking distorts our language and our language distorts our thinking. So really a simple thing is to just pay attention to words that you find yourself using. Now, for me, I had a really interesting experience with this. I woke up one morning after an 8-hour good sleep, and I talked to myself, by the way. I woke up, I got out of bed, and I heard myself saying out loud, I'm exhausted. Okay, it's like, Now, what's that about? I've just had an 8-hour sleep. And then I noticed in the day and in the following days, I used a version of that word all the time. They're exhausting. It's exhausting me. I'm exhausted. Different iterations of that word. And it struck me that I needed to look at this. What does this mean? And when I went inside, I realized, and that's a process of just sitting with yourself and kind of journaling and dreaming. I realized that it was a statement of internally, I was feeling very burnt out. I wasn't physically tired, but emotionally, I felt like the demands of my life were greater than my capacity to deal with them at the time. And now that was an interesting insight into what was going on beneath the surface. For other people, they say, oh, I'm such an idiot. Watch yourself saying that and give yourself a chance to unpack what's that about. Why do I keep saying this about myself? So using words or focusing on our language is a really easy way to get beneath the waterline and see what's happening beneath the surface.
Well, and do you have any stories you can share about how this energy healing has literally transformed an individual's life, one of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be careful because I don't, some of my clients actually listen to these podcasts. So,
Yes,
so I must, and I've got to always maintain just confidentiality. But
absolutely.
I will talk about one person or a couple of people who had a similar experience with me. The one person came to me because they'd lost touch with friends. Actually, they were lonely and their marriage was not great. There was something like they'd isolated themselves off and they wanted to reconnect with friendships and they wanted to build, meaningful connections with other people, including their spouse. And they were feeling at the time like a sense of numbness, apathy. And I did a healing on her. And I actually found was interesting because I read her timeline and I found a repetitive pattern that happened at the start of every decade, where there were major incidents at the start of every decade where this person disconnected from intimacy. And so I did the work, and then afterwards, I remember they reported having a really vivid dream, which is highly unusual. They had a heaving cold with lots of coughing, which was also very highly unusual. And I realized, okay, they're purging. Stuff is coming out to be released. And it took about 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 10 days, where their colleagues could see a change in their ability to really kind of connect. They felt lighter. There was something had shifted in their connection with their colleagues. The dynamic shifted with their spouse. This person's spouse started to come forward. And what struck me is that when I'm doing work like this, I'm healing not only the person, but also the family dynamic because they're
Yes.
connected so tight. So that was really interesting. It took like a week or two where the blocks around intimacy, and I'm not talking sexual, I'm talking just relational intimacy,
Right.
were healed really quickly. And I had a similar experience, I remember, with another client who came with a very deep issue. They had a memory of being abused sexually as a child. And in one session, literally one session, they felt like, this weight they were living with a sense of weightlessness for the first time since they were a child, and their relationships to their colleagues and, their spouse had changed fundamentally, and there was a noticeable difference. So, those things, it can happen very quickly if the person's ready, very quickly.
Well, I love that. As we come to a close, and I wish this conversation could go on for a few more hours.
Me too. I was looking at the time. It's like, that was quick.
Oh, I know. It just goes by. As you think about the audience, what would be a message that you would like to share with them that might help them in their lives?
The message I think that I want to share is that energy runs the show. Everything is energy. And if you release your blocks at an energetic level, you're going to release an invisible handbrake that's been holding you back. So give it a go. You don't have to be able to really see it for it to work. And yeah, that would be my message, that, energy, if you want epic transformation, go the energy route.
I love it. Gabrielle, thanks so much for being on the
Such a
show.
pleasure.
How do people find you?
They find me on my website, which is generative-growth.com.au. There are multiple ways of getting in touch with me there. Or they can just connect with me on Instagram, Gabrielle.Pimstone.
Okay. Gabrielle.Pimstone, Pimstone, folks, for
Yes.
that. So, folks, thanks for listening. I hope this has energized you a bit to really look at things and look at another way in which you might find some success and happiness. So, this is Dr. Doug saying namaste.